So the question in starting Gemara is, of course, which Perek to start with. And there are different opinions. Want to bring down something very special klal. And this is what we use in online Cheder at teirechinuch.com. And obviously the reasons for it. To begin with, there's a debate, and people know of two sides, and would like to show you a letter which puts a completely different perspective on it, and then why. Once heard from a Lubavitcher Rebbe that the difference between the Lubavitcher way and the Polish Chassidish way is like this: that the Polish Chassidim would start with the Yantiv Gemaras. They would start with Sukkah or something similar. And of course, the idea behind that is to give a geschmack in Gemara and in learning. And that the Litvish would start with Nezikin. I'm not sure if he said the Perek that they usually start with, which we'll discuss in a minute, or the Perek, I should say, that they usually start with today. But they do that to show a child that's what's not his is not his. Okay? And according to that, the Perek that deals with finding a lost object and what to do would then be Eilu Metzios, and we'll see why. We'll want to put a different perspective on this. And then I heard another reason why they do Eilu Metzios, which is that, of course, talks about a case of Lifnim Yeshuas Adin, and then it says that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because they didn't go Lifnim Yeshuas Adin. And of course, that's important. But honestly, if to teach a child the yashrus and to teach a child to ask if he's not sure what to do with something always is important. There's a letter that I want to pull up, and it's a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but the Rebbe is not talking about just one particular group. And before even pulling up the letter, I'll bring a story from the Rebbe Rayatz, from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Lubavitch. There was a person who came to ask business advice, a business bracha. The Frierdiker Rebbe gave him a business bracha, but also started talking with him about the education of his children, the Torah education. The tziyung, to raise them properly. And the person says, I came for a bracha for my business. I got the bracha I wanted. I didn't come really to discuss education. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said to him, to ask me about business and to ask me advice in business even, that you came for, and you're willing to follow my word 100%, even though I don't do business, my family hasn't done business, and my main inyan, which is education, Torah education, and raising children, and this is the main thing that his family was doing, that you don't want to hear. The letter is not to Chassidim. This is a letter from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it's to everyone about a Seder Halimut. Let's take a look. It's in Igros Kodesh, letters of the Rebbe, Krach Yud Gimel. And it says over here that the Minig Yisrael. We'll first see what it says, and then we'll discuss why, right? Nasa, v'nishma, there is a nishma, we have to understand why. The Minig Yisrael is to start in Tanakh with Sefer Vayikra. It's a medrash. That the pure children should come and deal with the Sefer that's all about purity and everything. And starting Gemara should be with HaMeiniach or HaMafkid. Now, usually when there's a choice, it's true. HaMeiniach is the third Perek of Bava Kama, and HaMafkid is the third Perek of Bava Metzia. So maybe it's just because of the order that it's listed like that, but also if the Rebbe writes HaMeiniach first out of the two, it seems like the preference is HaMeiniach, all things considered. And then the Rebbe goes on, V'dafke al yidei limud zeh, and specifically through learning like this, by starting with HaMeiniach HaMafkid, Hikimu ge'einei hadeires, the Torah geniuses. And genius here doesn't just mean smart, it means full of light, full of passion for Torah, full of passion for Hashem. And also the ones who really understood. The ones who are genius in understanding and explaining and really going deep into the subject. It's known that Lubavitch and Brisk were very close, that Lubavitch is a Litvish Chassidus, which means the Derech HaLimud comes from the same Derech HaLimud as the regular, as everything else that happened in Lithuania. And it seems, therefore, that this whole thing of starting with Eilu Metzios is much more a recent thing. That's already the NASA. Now let's look at the Nishma. Why does it make more sense to start with HaMeiniach? So let's take a look at the two arguments for starting with Eilu Metzios. One, that a child should know what's not his is not his, 100%. But can't we learn that through Yashras? If a child doesn't know that's what not his is not his, he doesn't need right now just Gemara. He needs to know, like the Rebbe said, to teach all people. There's an ayin raya and an oizen shemas. There's an eye that sees, an ear that hears, and all of your deeds are written down. We're accountable. If he doesn't know about how it would hurt the other person, and would he want to be chas v'shalom, would he want something taken from him or not returned to him? In fact, I'm sorry to say, but if we start this only with Gemara and on the daf, it confuses people because people have a big misunderstanding. They learn Eilu Metzios and they think that they're not paying attention. So they hear about a siman. Oh, if it has no siman, you can't keep it. The place where something is lost is a siman. People don't know that. And if it has no siman and the owner doesn't know it's lost, and you pick it up before he knows it's lost, you don't own it because he hasn't lost it yet, really. He loses it. It goes out of his rishus only when he finds out that it's lost and he gives up hope. And if you picked it up before that time, then you're not kaina it. You can't acquire it. And there's so many other complicated things in general. Whenever a lost object is found, it's best to ask a Rav. And when you're teaching a child Gemara, that kind of Gemara is either going to, he's either going to not pay attention and then really not get it, or it could confuse him. Second, if Nimish Rosadin, that's important. You can't explain HaMeiniach properly, the first few lines, without Lifnim Mishur Sadin. And I'll give you, before, we'll do a separate video on how to learn the beginning of HaMeiniach. But before that, let's just take a look over here and tell me how you could explain to a child, and you have to explain the Gemara well, without talking about Lifnim Mishur Sadin. In the first few cases, you have a case right over here. And the Mishnah starts out talking about a kad, which usually means a jug. And while it's talking about the same object, it refers to it as a chavis, which usually means a barrel. The answer we'll get to even in this video. But before that, it brings other Mishnayos, which have a similar problem. Not a problem, but a similar, they've changed the wording for a reason. Let's take a look at not so much the wording, but the idea behind this, because at every point you have to explain to the child Why is the Gemara bringing this? How does it fit in with our argument? But before you even do that, you have to learn the piece on its own. A person is walking with a barrel of wine, and one is walking with a jug of honey. The barrel of honey, again changing the word kad and chavis to show you that they're really the same. Anyway, the barrel of honey cracked. Honey is much more expensive than wine, and you could explain to them why. You could explain to them the whole farming process involved in honey. So the person poured out his wine because he has a jug or a barrel that can hold stuff, and he saved the honey inside of his barrel. The person who poured out his wine does not get paid back for the wine. He just gets paid the amount that you would pay somebody to actually go and save the honey. Obviously, you go through it when you're explaining it to a child, word for word. But you also sit down and explain to them like this. The honey barrel, the whole barrel of honey, let's say, is worth $100, $200 today. The barrel of wine that he spilled out in order to use the barrel to save the honey that was oozing all over the place because the guy who owned the honey's barrel broke and the honey is just spilling all over the place, was worth maybe $20. So he spills out the wine and he says, here, use my barrel. Obviously, that's because kosher wine, of course. And the person's honey was saved. And he saved the man a loss of about $100, $200. If the guy says to him, no, I'm not paying you the $20 because you spilled out the wine on your own, I didn't tell you to, is anyone going to help him again? So you have to go to Pnimim Shosadid. And then he says, so why is the law like this? I said, because there's a few cases. Let's say that the man who spilled out the wine is rich and the other one's very poor. So he might say, look, this is on me. And if the guy doesn't want to do what's right and doesn't want to pay him, there's some things that Bezdin can't force. You can't force somebody always to do what's right. It's, after all, their property. So you have to know what the law is. And there are other reasons too. Somebody might say, I'm not owed it. It's a present. I don't want to take presents. I want to rely on Hashem. That's legitimate. So you have to know whose it is and you have to know what the law is. But you have to know that if the case comes to you, the judge should certainly say, I suggest that you go above the letter of the law. Now let's go to why these Mishnayos changed the word kad with chavis. And it's to teach us. Rav Papa explains, Hainu kad, Hainu chavis. Kad is a chavis. By the way, today, people understand it better. You could point and you could prepare Google images of an old barrel, which was basically, it was also pottery, and it was just big, and an old jug, which was almost the same size. It was just thin. And here you have a Taisvis that tells you, look, if this was some kind of big jug versus a small jug or anything, then you would go according to the amount of money that was put down. It's when the jug and the barrel are about the same price. Why? Because the barrel holds a little bit more. The jug probably keeps it fresher longer. It's a small little thing, or it's more useful. So they were about the same cost. At the same time, though, the Gemara is not, and the Mishnah is not meant as a dictionary, chas v'shalom. So the Gemara says, lemai, for what nafka comes out, mina, from it. That's another thing. People touch lemai nafka mina, what's the difference? Okay, but teach each word, show them what the word means, and then explain that that's an expression to tell you what comes out from it. What is the difference? What's the practical difference that comes out from this? Yes, the Mishnah is teaching us that kad is chavis, but the Mishnah is not here to teach us language. And it says the mekachu mimkar, for buying and selling. And he gets into an opinion, and in the end, it talks about, it explains that when there's a majority that calls a barrel a chavis, and a minority that calls a barrel the same barrel, a kad. We don't say that we go by the majority. If the store owner says, I legitimately, when he bought from me a chavis and he paid me for a chavis, I thought he meant a jug. That's what I call a jug. There's other people in the town who call it that too. It's his fault for not specifying, and I'm giving him what I thought he wanted, and he has to take the jug. He doesn't get, he's not entitled, al pidin, and I'm going to say this very clearly, according to the strict letter of the law, he's not entitled to a refund. And at the same time, if I tell the store owner, I make up with the store owner, okay, I'm going to buy from you a chavis, and I mean a jug, and he comes and he brings me a barrel and he expects payment, I can say, look, you brought me this, but you didn't specify. You know, there are people in the city, there's 5%, 10%, whatever it is, who mean a jug when they say chavis. You didn't specify, it's your problem. But is that how we should do business with each other? And if the store owner especially is going to do business like that, is anyone going to do business with him again? And even the customers, the store owner going to go out of his way to... So it tells you should work things out. It tells you that Livnim Meshus Adin is a way of life. Going above the letter of the law has to be a way of life. So you get Livnim Meshus Adin if you just explain it properly. Okay, why not Eilu Metzios? Because to teach a Mishnah like this, HaMeiniach HaMafkid, somebody who places a kad in the street and somebody trips over it, and then when it talks about somebody getting injured by it, the same kad is called a chavis. That's a question a kid can wrap his head around, and then you explain him slowly but surely the explanation while also explaining the words. And what you learn out from it. And why. And also asking him, but is it a good idea? And teaching him about Lifnei Meshus Adin. But at the end of the day, the child understands the Mishnah. The kid could repeat back to you, who's just learning Gemara, that yes, the word kad and chavis are changed around to let you know that if I buy something and I call it by a name that only a few people call it by in the city, only a small percentage call it by in the city, it's up to the other person to check. In Eilu Metzios, it says, Matzah peiros mefuzarim. If he found scattered fruit, and if you look into the Gemara and you start reading it and you have to understand it, you understand that it's not talking about fruit as we would call fruit, it's talking about wheat. And the child starts saying, wait, 1 second, peiros is wheat. The Gemara is complicated. Then ask him to tell you, when are you allowed to keep a lost object, when are you not, and with all the different scenarios. Right? There's Siman Asli Dores, there's Makim Siman, he doesn't know. Because he's just starting Gemara. And then not just that, but there are cases brought down there. There's a case dealing with Truma, and you have to explain what Truma is. And it confuses him. HaMeiniach and HaMafkid are all about mamonus, all about monetary laws. It says, a person who wants to become wise, he should deal with the monetary laws. And there's a reason for that, because when you're learning the monetary laws, you learn that if this and this happens, the law is like this. And you think for a second, wow, if this and this were to happen and be presented to me, I would say the law is different. And then, but you know that Hashem's right. And I asked the Talmud once, I said, look, who's smarter, you or Hashem? Hashem created the universe in 6 days. It would take you at least 8, no? So he sits down for 5 minutes and he thinks this is the law, but why is it like that? And then you realize, oh, because, and you realize if I was just trying to be good and go based on my own knowledge, I would have made somebody responsible to pay who's not responsible, and that would have been taking money from him unlawfully. Or I would have denied somebody payment who should be paid. Eventually, after 5-10 minutes of thinking over the idea, it clicks and you realize why, even according to logic, this is the law. Now, to get a good grounding in the laws of Nezikin, HaMeiniach teaches you law after law, case after case in financial laws without getting into truma, without getting into very, very hard to define cases of when one must return a lost object and when one doesn't have to go around and try to find the owner. And the in-betweens. So when he just holds on to it, HaMeiniach also and HaMafkid are about understanding the basic financial laws. To teach a child that when he finds something, he should ask a Rav, and before that, even just ask an adult what to do, an adult who knows Cheder, that's easy. To teach them the essentials of Gemara, HaMeiniach HaMafkid. The Rebbe wasn't talking about something new. The Rebbe was talking about a Mesora and a tradition. And it's very possible that this whole thing to start with Eilu Metzios is something that started in America. Whereas this, the Rebbe is talking about for generations, just like it says in Medrash to start with Vayikra. And it's known when a child goes in for their first day in Cheder, their Reinfirnish, or whatever their first day of Cheder is going to be, that we start with a few psukim Vayikra, if it's his first day in a Cheder. Then, and maybe according to that, there should be more of Vayikra than just the first few psukim. One can make the case for that. Then for sure, by Gemara, one should start with HaMeiniach or HaMafkid, and with this, a person is motivated and they feel they understand the Gemara, and the child goes on and they're able to become Ge'ina Havana, great in understanding, Vahasbara, and able to explain Vahamaka, and to go deeply into these concepts, because you're going from one monetary concept to another and it flows. And that's the case to start with HaMeiniach, and that's how we do it. Bezos Hashem at TeiraChinuch.com. Encourage people to see the site. And we have a lot of stuff to offer in good chinuch, and look forward to speaking with you also about maybe your children joining.